Exceptional Randos Show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.
Hey, fall is finally here. It's like time to turn off air conditioners and break out sweaters and hoodies and long sleeve shirts and pants and not feel like a weirdo. and also less reliance on things like bug spray. Fucking bug spray. It's like a necessary evil of going outside. Another necessary evil is masks.
Mosquitoes are really bad this year.
Dude, they're everywhere. I wonder, you have to have standing water for mosquitoes to start multiplying in mass, and I wonder what's going on. Was there like some big uptick in the number of inflatable pools sold over the last year or something like that?
I mean, I think we had a lot of flash floods, so
yeah.
We're getting a lot of periods where there would be standing water and poor drainage. So I know, especially downtown, it's just breeding ground for mosquitoes. And it doesn't take it all year or all season where, you just have it a couple times where 3 or 4 flash floods spaced enough apart, and it's like, yeah, that's all it takes.
Yeah. We've also had some pretty impressive storms this season. This last tornado and storm season. I think it's hard to really recall all of the storms because they're always compared to Katrina, and before that they were compared to like Hurricane Andrew or something like that. And when I was younger, you don't really remember these things because there's storms every year. And I remember at one point, the first time I realized the way that started to understand the way that the naming convention worked. They alternate male and female, and then they run through the alphabet. I think the first time I realized what was going on, it was like they'd gotten through the alphabet one time, and I thought we were already past the M's or something like that. But they just have more and more that meet the minimum criteria for a hurricane or tornadoes touching down. That used to be oh my, the calamity. And now they're just getting bigger and bigger. Almost to the point that anytime you see anything about a tornado, it's more like how successful were emergency operations afterwards in responding to immediate needs of that community.
Yeah, these things are getting more and more frequent, it seems, and more intense. I'm just wondering, are the scales going to have to change soon? Because it's twice as big as an F5 tornado, you know what I mean? Is it just still an F5? Because that's where I think we're hitting this point where our storm events are starting to it seems like every storm is the biggest one we've ever had, or every tornado is the biggest one we have ever had. And at that point, it's like, well, at what point do we have to start creating new classes because our extreme weather has gone beyond what we were originally measuring?
Well, the Federation had to reclassify warp speeds numerous times to accommodate, what is, warp factor 10 in relation to everything else. I don't think it's unreasonable to maintain a naming convention and just change the standards. I think that's pretty.
But then does that like ruin the capacity to understand what's actually happening? Because it's like if we, for example, with the Richter scale, if we just shift it so that, you know, the more extreme stuff still is a 9 and a 10 because we've gotten more extreme seismic events so that we've had to adjust what we deem as like a 3 or a 4.
You know what? I gotta like I've had a few seconds to reconsider it, and I realize now that if the scale just shifts, then a 1928 F5 might be confused with a 2025, you know, F5.
When it would really be a 2022 F1.
Yeah,
And that's what I mean is like, it makes it hard to grasp the progression of size if we just shift the scale. And that's kind of where, like, were the tornadoes in 1920 as intense as they are now? And it doesn't seem like they were. It seems like there may have been individual events that had scale on the same par as what's happening now, but not with the same frequency where, you know, we have F3, F4 tornado, F5 tornadoes, that's just the norm now.
Yeah.
Whereas before, even if they were happening, it would be an F1 or an F2, and it wouldn't be near as frequent.
What if they just change the letter and keep the numbers? But then there's a sliding scale to indicate that an F5 is actually like, or is a T1.
I mean, you know, I'm not the one to come up with it, but that's where, again, I think it makes it more difficult to establish that there is something happening when the scale just stays the same and it shifts, because then you're like, oh, well, it's still just an F5 tornado. And it's like, well, that's not the same F5 tornado as your grandfather's F5.
In like in 100 years, we'll be having like F20 tornadoes, and people like, when was the last time an F1 even happened? Like, oh, we don't even know. Nobody was alive the last time an F1 happened.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing with hurricanes in that when they're tropical storms and then they graduate to hurricane level, because of the speed of movement, sometimes tropical storms can be more devastating than Category 1 hurricanes because they sit and flood. So it's like even the way that our understanding of the tropical storm to hurricane system, it doesn't even accurately reflect that upgrade does not even reflect, it doesn't necessarily correlate with the level of destruction. There may be more destruction with the lower level storm in some cases. And that's where I'm like, the way that we think about these things is greatly influenced by the systems by which we measure them. And I think it does become, it makes it more difficult to establish climate change when the scale stays the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's much more difficult to show that things have changed.
I 100% agree I 100% agree. Although my mind keeps going back to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah, because then it's not, you know, it's not easy to come up with the solution either.
Yeah, it
and
really isn't.
I'm not claiming to know, like, okay, we can't do it this way, and here's how we do it, because that's where I'm like,
yeah, how
I'm definitely not claiming to, how do you solve that problem? I don't know. I definitely am not claiming to know the solution. It's more so like, it seems like something that is contributing to further being entrenched in the the impotence of misinformation, and it's hard to get out of that, because then the argument would be, oh, well, they just changed the system to make it look like it's changing. And then that's, you know, it's very easy for illogical people to appear to pick apart something if you don't understand how logic works. So that's where I'm not trying to constantly be arguing against fringe ideas because that's a losing battle.
I just keep thinking about the last decade where we get these really elaborate explanations for things, and it's like it falls on the wrong ears, and like the internet always seems to interpret things like the worst way possible right away, and at times it seems like detailed explanations are almost backfiring, especially in the last year. It's
Well, and
it's crazy because I'm a firm believer that a nuanced explanation and exploration of any kind of question can lead to like truth or understanding or the emergence of like more questions. But fucking people are taking a horse dewormer and unproven medications, and then there are even complex ties through to legislators in states that are pushing unproven treatments. And it gets even weirder when you got like doctors and and healthcare professionals who are getting on board with all this crap because it's been like so politicized. Like information itself.
And then you find out that there's a bunch of people profiting off of it.
Yeah.
Obviously, that was happening, but then it's like, well, in this environment, that's not only legal, but it's rewarded. So it's a matter of what is the long-term outcome of this environment that promotes profit motive over everything, including the health of the citizens. And people taking horse dewormer and a small group of people profiting is the outcome. So we see it now, and we see, and I'm like, okay, go ahead first. Take that horse dewormer. I'm not trying to stop fucking racist ass, hick ass people from taking some shit that's going to make them blind and piss out their ass. So they can do all that and fuck themselves over if they want. I'm not trying to stop them from doing that. The issue becomes you see that these people are somehow,
I don't know, they're consuming the
sitting
crap out of our health care resources.
right, but it's because they have a lot of money. Some of these people have managed to have hundreds of thousands of dollars in their bank accounts.
Yeah.
And it's like, how the fuck do people who take horse dewormer end up with so much capital? And it's because this system is designed to steal it from every like hardworking people and give it to dumb fucking feudal lords. And this is where, feudalism is still present in our society, and everyone in America would do themselves justice to try to understand in which caste they exist. Because, there are very much castes in America, but we like to point at India as if their caste system, because it's explicit, is actually like somehow different than the one we have here, as if we don't have untouchables and fucking invisible people in America. And that's where I'm looking at it in a way that the way caste systems have even been otherized to make it invisible here, so that people end up, the lower class people who are taking the ivermectin think of themselves on the same level as the upper class people who are lying to them about taking ivermectin. And that's the illusion of not having a caste system. And that's where, again, it's crazy that, we've got, like I said, we've gotten this far because even the lower class fucking horse dewormer people are sitting on a lot of capital, because this system is designed to create a caste system in which even that dumbest person of that caste can end up making hundreds of thousands of dollars to burn on fucking horse dewormer. And that's the craziest shit, where I'm like, a lot of these people probably have mortgages. They probably are sitting on properties that are worth a lot of money. Some of them may be worth millions of dollars. And I'm not talking about the Rogans. I'm talking about just like regular ass people in the fucking country on a big ass plot of land, hundreds of acres, fucking big ass fucking barn, farm equipment. This is some dude with no teeth, probably on meth, is able to get that much capital because the system it rewards a certain caste, but those people will still claim that they're oppressed because they don't understand the caste system either. So it's real crazy to see the fucking toothless millionaires running around in America fucking taking horse dewormer, going blind, shitting out their ass or pissing out their asses, fucking, you know, like uncontrollably because they have so much capital that they can stack up a bunch of horse dewormer and then not be able to do the math to know how much a human dose will be compared to the horse dosage. That's the demographic. And I love to see them just fucking burning their money, destroying themselves because Joe Rogan fucking advocated them to take some fucking horse dewormer.
Yeah, I mean, while the Schadenfreude's great, like, there's still part of me that it's just like, that when they go to the hospital, there's some person who's now unable to get into the hospital for something that they didn't do to themselves.
But that's because the hospital is fucking money driven too, and they're not making the smart decision. Anybody who's not vaccinated should not be getting service at a hospital, period. And that's what I'm saying. Like, that situation is only because our hospitals are beheld to money making decisions that then don't allow them to refuse the fucking ivermectin patients. And that's where that shit was happening before the fucking pandemic, bro. Our hospitals were overextended. People were fucking getting turned away. They weren't able to get, like, if you had an emergency situation before the pandemic, good luck getting in the fucking actual ER because that shit was overbooked before the pandemic. And people forget how, like, go back and look at articles in 2017, 2018, fucking 2019. That shit was already on the brink of failure. Yeah. It was already breaking. Yeah. And people are like, well, the crazy shit is the blaming the pandemic for breaking the medical system just displaces the fact that the medical system was already fucking broken and it was already on the verge of like completely collapsing. So that's where I'm like, the pandemic, it was just another straw. The camel's back was already broken. America's just got a good PR machine is what it comes down to.
Yeah. I mean, anything about hospitals refusing to treat unvaccinated people on Google search is all within the last 2 months. And I'm sure this wouldn't have been the first time that healthcare professionals have refused to treat people who, for some reason or another. This can't be the first time that this kind of ethical quandary has arisen. I don't really see it as much of an ethical quandary. These are people that willfully have put themselves in harm's way.
I think vets from Vietnam suffered a similar, which is why a lot of them ended up on
the street,
illicit drug. On the street, but also on illicit drugs but it was hard for them to get mental or physical care.
Yeah,
because. You know, people were making it fucking political. They find out you fought in Vietnam. Not to say that this was everywhere, but this is some shit that the previous generations did that we aren't doing now. That, you know, it's not necessarily like patting ourselves on the back, but we're not as incapable of nuance as the previous generations. Where, like I said, if you for whatever reason, whether it says you were poor and had no choice and had to enlist or got drafted and couldn't fucking run or whatever, you come back from Vietnam and Americans were treating your ass like shit in a lot of cases. They weren't, they weren't even pretending to do the pseudo soldier fucking worship that they're doing now, because that shit ain't real either. But at least now they're like pretending to worship the soldiers, whereas then it was like spitting on them, fucking, you know, might not get able to get treated at like a fucking psychologist. So that's what I'm like, it's really crazy how far we've actually come in being able to be nuanced about understanding that, like, yeah, sometimes people are put in spots where they have to go like fight in an actual war and they didn't have a choice. They really didn't have a choice, but some people are incapable of understanding what it's like to be in a spot without having a choice, like where you think you don't have a choice, where it's like the only other choice is going to prison and then ended up getting drafted anyway. Cause it's like, you know, there's shit where you're like, that wasn't a real choice. That person's back was in two poor decisions. Both of them were going to end up having them serving the state. They never had, this person was born into a spot where they were going to serve the state one way or another. They never had a choice not to serve the state. It was either going to be as a prisoner or as a fucking soldier. And that's where people acting like those people had a real choice are fucking assholes and don't understand what it's like to be in true poverty and not really have a choice out of a scenario where there's like, you know, going to serve or signing up for the ROTC for whatever to make sure that you can pay your rent and not be homeless and then end up coming back and being homeless anyway. And that's where the way that previous generation was not, I mean, not everybody in it, obviously, but a significant amount of them were incapable of understanding the fact that some people don't really have a choice, and they were blaming them for the fucking government's decisions. Because that's what I'm like, if you had taken all of those people that got drafted and taken those people and had them build infrastructure and maintain infrastructure in America, nobody would hate them. Nobody would be calling them baby killers. Nobody would be fucking trying to spit on them because they would be doing fantastic things to help society. No, our government was decided, oh, let's send them over to fucking Vietnam and start killing people for whatever fucking dumb reason we're going to do this. That's what our government did. And then the soldiers got blamed for the fucking few cowardly ass motherfuckers who sit on Capitol Hill and are willing to send kids to fucking die for some shit. Nobody should ever be able to send somebody to die for anything. That's dumb. You know, that's fucking dumb. I'm sorry, that's just dumb.
It's interesting because that didn't happen at the end of the Korean conflict, at the end of the Korean War. Those guys came home and they all got jobs and reintegrated
very
into
small window.
Yeah. I mean, it was, and that was an armistice, but when the United States left Vietnam, it was like tail between their legs. I mean, there have been a lot of comparisons between the Afghanistan, what do they call it when they undeploy or whatever?
You mean lose?
Yeah, lose.
Americans have a real hard time saying that word about war. It's real crazy.
Yeah, well, I was trying to remember the term they were using when they withdraw. That's right, the Afghanistan withdraw.
Which euphemism was it this time?
Yeah.
How did they gloss up the loss this time?
Man, like the
withdrawal.
There's a very special portion of the lexicon dedicated to U.S. Losses during armed conflicts.
Yeah. And that's where even the fact that we just lost a very long, once again, the
2 decades long, protracted ass fucking.
America needs to learn to stop fucking with farmers, man.
Yeah.
Stop trying to fight farmers with rockets, because y'all gonna lose every fucking time, apparently. You can't fight farmers with rockets. Apparently. You'd think they'd fucking learn. Nah, bro. Nah, we're gonna take these farmers. It's gonna be 6-month war. No, you know what? 6 days. How about that? 6 days will be in and out. Shit'll be over. 20 years fucking later. Nah, man. They need to stop fucking with farmers, is what it is. Period.
Yeah. Like they can take away land that these guys know.
Anti-war altogether. But apparently the U.S. military, their kryptonite is farmers. You got this big ass military machine, and just like the British lost to guerrilla warfare, apparently a big ass fucking military machine is susceptible to farmer guerrilla warfare. Who would have thought that we had the fucking proof in the founding of this goddamn country that you can't have a bloated military going against farmers. It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
The goddamn American fucking example. It's like these people don't even know the history. I mean, obviously they don't know the history of their country, but if they would have taken a goddamn second to realize if you're a bloated military and you fight farmers, guess what? That's how you get America winning. That's how you have America beating the fucking British goddamn military. Biggest empire on the fucking planet at the time, lost to some goddamn farmers. Because that's what happens. That's what happens.
Well, the British cheaped out and bought smoothbore muskets, and farmers in America had rifles. And so they could shoot accurately like between 100 and 200 yards, and the Brits were lucky to get accuracy out to like 50 yards.
And I mean, that's part of it, but
also you reminded me
the rank and file.
Yeah, you also reminded me of like this one moment in Punisher TV series when Castle's going and looking for his buddy, and he's like walking around in the woods, and this is like the only time in the show that I acknowledged that he was actually in any real danger, because he had no idea where his buddy was. His dude like sneaks up on him with like deer hunter camo and a bow and arrow and shoots him. He wouldn't have stood a chance. And like that's essentially what's going on. A advanced military is going into unknown territory, and the people who live there know that place like the back of their hand. They can blend into the countryside like they don't even exist, and can't expect some dude from Nebraska to walk into the middle of Afghanistan and know what the fuck's going on. There's no amount of intelligence or satellite imagery or whatever that's going to be able to give that person the kind of familiarity that somebody who grew up in that, 10 square mile area knows. Like,
and the only way that the empires are able to beat those people is to cause infighting and cause their neighbors to start turning on them. And that's historically the way they fucking do it. Go back thousands of years. That's the way they've been doing it in conquering those types of regions, because once you have a very geographically isolated, it doesn't have to even have a specific resource, but it's like if something, whether it's desert or mountain or valley or anything that has a unique geographic identity and has a people develop with it, that people will inherently have an advantage against an attacking party. And that's why over time, the only way that outside attackers ever win is by like turning their neighbors against them and then attacking. Is not something that you can't really ever beat those people. And then when you beat them, it's like you can't hold that territory either because you don't know the territory enough to fucking hold it. So it's you can point at many examples historically of this happening, but that's also where you can point at the opposite example of like Iran or Afghanistan, where people try to go in and try to fucking get the people out, and because they know this shit, you can't. You're not gonna fucking beat them in their home territory. It's just not gonna happen.
Yeah.
And that's where people will try and try and try and lose and lose and lose and not fucking read the history books, man. That's what's so insane to me is like, if they just took a goddamn second and fucking read, just fucking read for one goddamn minute, they'd realize, okay, maybe we shouldn't do this. Okay, we're going to lose a lot of people. We're going to lose, and this is going to make us vulnerable in the end. Maybe we shouldn't do this. Because that's what happened to America. That's what happened to Russia. That's what happened to fucking anybody that got involved trying to attack any of those fucking territories, man. Yeah. Just historically, like, God damn it, people, just fucking read.
Well, it happened within the United States. We had fought a big ass civil war.
Yep.
And that's how it all worked out. Eventually, they got people to turn on each other, and so even on a big like continental scale, it still pans out. People in charge still get what they want. or they don't, or they somehow lose out. Well, with Afghanistan, it seems like we've lost because what did we do? We enriched some military contractors. We enriched the military industrial complex and paid for it with taxes, and just returned Afghanistan back to the Taliban, right? The United States had to have gotten something out of it, right? They didn't just send people off to die for 20 years.
They enriched some military contractors.
Yeah.
With tax money is what they got out of it. Yep, that's it. So that's where I'm saying, like, when we have those things happening and 20 years of enriching private military contractors as the outcome, and everyone else suffering the consequences, it's like, man, why? How is it so difficult to, but obviously it's because they're holding the bag, but it's like, this is one of the reasons I stay away from the United States dollar, because effectively staying in that currency is keeping this military industrial complex going at the end of the day. And it's like, people want to like that or not, like, you don't have to believe it, but the issue is, like, effectively keeping US dollar dominance on the globe is what's keeping the US military dominant. It goes hand in hand. And you don't have to do any specific currency. You can go fucking yuan.
Well, it doesn't matter. The oil is valued in USD.
I mean, and that's part of it, is like, not the IMF is not anymore using the USD as the only. There's a basket of currencies. And
China's not using USD.
Yeah, exactly.
They're valuing their own stuff.
Also, Russia's oil is not valued in USD. Iran's is not valued in USD, or backed in USD rather. We see the value in USD, but the backing is not. So that's where there are more and more countries getting off of USD petrodollar backing, and this is one of the things that our government actively tries to keep people ignorant on, because monetary policy and military policy go hand in hand. So if Americans don't know about monetary policy, they're not going to be able to deconstruct the military policy. So it's like, you can vote for hope all you fucking want, but if you don't know how the USD works, that military ain't going nowhere, because they've got funding sources coming from places that you don't even fucking realize that they own stocks in, that fund their, because it's not even about like taxes, not even that. There's like military investment in companies. For example, Facebook, like the way that Facebook benefits the military and their capacity to retrieve information is not just law enforcement. So you'll be able to, like, track, there's probably a shitload of stock that the military at some level has made money off, and still probably owns some in Facebook, for the sake of making sure that Facebook understands who they're really beheld to at the end of the day. Because as much as people want to be like, oh, Mark Zuckerberg's calling the shots, no, the fuck he's not. You just think Mark Zuckerberg is calling the shots. The military is the one that's calling the shots.
I mean, anytime
at the end of the day,
anytime someone uses a microwave oven, they're paying homage to the U.S. military.
Which, again, it's like NASA, as much as the great things they've done for science, it's basically just to make sure the science for the weapons program functions. We just see the civilian front end, because technically astronauts a lot of times aren't even civilians, and a lot of them end up being military. So it's like, not to say that everyone who went into space for NASA was military, because that's not what it is, but it crosses over in a lot of they'll take like test pilots.
I'm pretty
and the
sure that
test
they want
pilots are the ones-
pilots.
Right. So they're coming from the Air Force in a lot of cases. So it's like the actual astronauts are a military even before they went to NASA. So these I mean, obviously Operation Paperclip and all that, you know, everybody can trace back the weird ass fucking origins of NASA.
So-
we don't need any conspiracy to prove that.
The guy that brought us the microwave oven, his name is Percy Spencer. He worked for Raytheon at the time. So I'm pretty sure that means Raytheon gets a you know, they get a taste anytime anyone buys a microwave anywhere on Earth.
And that's one of the worst companies.
Holy shit. They're up in Indianapolis too.
Yeah, and I know, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people know someone that has worked there at one point or another. But I have a friend that worked there, and it was like he ended up quitting because he couldn't deal with the things that the company did, and it left him with too guilty of a conscience to keep working there, which is where, you know, when you know what that company does and you know how much death and destruction is associated with their existence, that company is like Evil Corp. It is E Corp. There's no difference. Raytheon's worse because it's real. At least Evil Corp is fucking fictional. Raytheon is real, and real people die because our government gives Raytheon money. And that's where it ends up being really fucked up when you're like talking. These are companies that profit in death. This shit was not as explicit before. These were the deals that went on behind backroom, fucking smoke-filled rooms in empires of thousands of years past. Now these are line item budgets in our government. How much death is a line item budget in the U.S. government? And
Raytheon
we can't do anything.
$56.58 billion in 2020.
We can't do anything about it.
That's their revenue for
Nothing.
2020.
There is nothing you and I or anybody listening to this can do about the money our government gives for line item death. We can't do anything about it.
2 years of Raytheon
sit-in.
pays the ransom from Dr. Evil. Like
But then
one
we're
time.
we're supposed to feel bad when our government is dealing in death, even though we can't do anything about it. And then these motherfuckers in Congress will tell us, no, just go out and vote. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Those people need to shut the fuck up because they all got paid. They all got their jobs letting that stuff happen. I don't want to hear shit from any person in Congress. I don't want to hear shit from anybody ever again about voting, because voting did not stop death. Voting did not stop our government from dealing in death. So all those people who tell you to vote to stop this need to shut the fuck up. All of them. Because that did not stop death. I voted against death. It didn't stop it.
Even in 2018, I mean, they were only making $25 billion a year in 2018, but between 2018 and 2020, their revenue doubled. I can't find their 2019 number right now. I'm not really looking. Nope, they made $45 billion in 2019.
Good God. That's all line item death. Boston Dynamics, line item death. Dancing fucking robots, making little flashy TikTok videos to go viral. Line item death that they're dressing up, that they make us complicit in, man. And this is obviously the only thing we can really do about it is talk about it. But that's the craziest shit. We can't do anything but talk about it. You know, and then they put us on a list for talking about it.
It's scary to think about being chased by a dog that's going to bite you. But when that dog is a machine that won't get tired, that has a taser and will just tase your ass like until humans show up to detain you, or until a robot shows up to detain you, and good luck overpowering a robot.
That's why every time, having lived through a police state lockdown, every time I see one of these things, I'm thinking about the simplest way to like make them not work. And you'd be amazed how easy a paint-filled balloon would take out some of this shit, bro.
Yeah. paint and
Paint-filled
glitter
balloon.
with a
Yeah.
put metal pigment.
Glitter? Oh, yeah.
Metal pigment
yeah.
in there because metal conducts electricity. Yeah.
Yeah, man. And that's where I'm like, I'm just looking at low cost solutions to start taking these things out just to have in the back of my head. Cause that's what I'm like, look, if they think that they can do this to people, they got another thing coming, man. They've got another thing coming. Cause I've seen when the like US fucking tear gas canisters are on the streets and like the citizens are fighting back. I'm not about to be like on the losing end of that. And that's where I'm saying like, it's crazy because the way these things are made, it's like, oh, who are you planning to use this shit against if not us? They're the ones ramping up for war. So if they want to like declare war on the citizens, you know what I'm saying? They're gonna fucking lose, man. You can't declare war on your own citizens in this country, and it's not gonna work. So
well, we've seen the outcome of when the government tries to militarize the police, and the police use those tools, and civilians end up in hospitals with gigantic can-sized wounds and missing eyes, and like we know what that outcome is.
Firsthand, man. I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah.
I'm not just pictures. I've seen that shit firsthand, bro.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm traumatized as fuck from that shit. I'm not about to let that shit like happen again.
I mean, I have no illusions that like the reaction that the people in Turkey had would be any different from the reaction that people in this country had either. Like I don't have any illusions that like a developed country with a society that's older than ours is somehow going to be less mature in their response. I mean, if anything, old societies have worked through these problems before, and our society seems to suffer like the weirdest institutional amnesia. And
this is like, okay, everybody last year was saying that stuff was like, oh, it feels like everything was falling apart. And I'm like, no, this is not it at all. I'm trying to tell people in the middle of all that shit, like, this is not even remotely close to falling apart. And here we are a year later. Guess what? It wasn't.
Yeah.
And I'm, at the time, I'm looking like a crazy person because, yeah, shit's going down. But I'm like, no, I've been in a place where it's like legit falling apart. We're so far from that.
Yeah.
Like, okay, whatever. Yeah, a year later, guess what? I was fucking right. I was fucking right. Go back and listen. I was fucking right.
Did they deploy tanks at any of during the summer of protest?
Like actual tanks?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think they deployed like armored vehicles, but not actual tanks.
Yeah.
I don't think there were any actual tanks deployed. People would lie and say, "Oh, they saw National Guard with tanks and all." Nobody ever had any fucking tanks, bro. There was never actual live ammunition tanks rolling through the streets of America. That never fucking happened.
Yeah, I'm seeing things like Marine Corps tank battalions shutting down, tanks being divested, U.S. armor being like being put into.
That would be a war crime, bro. That would be a legit war crime.
No, like literally everything that tanks deployed USA 2020, it's only armored vehicles, and it says tanks are being divested.
People
or
lie.
stored.
People don't know the difference. And that's the shit, like, no actual tanks were deployed in Turkey. Like, that would be a fucking war crime, bro.
Yeah.
Like, if you deploy actual armored vehicle, like an armored tank that has live ammunition on your own people, you are probably going in front of a, like, war tribunal, like, at some point. I don't know if it's going to be U.S. led, UN led, I don't know, but that's some like war crime level shit where
well,
even the worst day in Turkey, there was no live ammunition tanks rolling through the city. That's like because again, it's, you can do so much shit. You can kill your own people, but you're not, I mean, and that's where again, it's like if you kill somebody with a non-fatal round, and this is what was happening, is like people would be getting hit in the face with like a paintball or a canister, so they weren't getting hit by
lethal
bullets.
ordnance.
Exactly. They weren't getting hit by lethal ordnance, but there were situations in which they were dying. So then that's where it goes into the gray area of, is this a war crime? So then that's where shit starts to be like, oh, people are dying because you are killing them with what are meant to be non-lethal rounds used incorrectly, because you're like supposed to fire canisters at the ground, or like fucking rubber bullets, you're supposed to fire them at the ground and not directly at the person. So there's all these things about, if you use it the incorrect way, well, they all never should be used anyway, but regardless, if you use what was meant to be a non-lethal round incorrectly, it can become lethal. So then when these things were happening, that's when the shit starts crossing into like gray, is this war crime territory? And that's why the Istanbul shit like became international news, because people were dying, but not because they were rolling out live ordnance tanks. That shit never actually happened. So this is where when people in America are saying that shit's happening, they're completely full of shit. They are so completely full of shit that then it becomes impossible to like even have the conversation when people thinking that like that is even remotely possible. It would take actual Red Dawn for live ordnance tanks to be rolling through the streets in America. When the Boston bomber shit happened, they had armored vehicles rolling through the streets, not tanks. The things that have battering rams on them are not tanks. They are armored vehicles with battering rams. They just happen to look a lot like tanks, and people can't tell the difference. Yeah. It's really crazy.
Yeah. No, when I was in Tiananmen Square, I looked around and I thought, like, how the fuck can they even get a tank in here? Like, tanks are fucking huge.
Oh yeah,
they're like monstrous. They take up entire 2-lane roads. They're not like, can't just drive them down the street. They destroy the roads, completely destroy roads.
The roads are not equipped to handle all that weight. With a gun, with a 50 millimeter cannon or some shit. Fuck, man. Fuck out of here. And all the artillery. Come on. Fuck out of here, man. So that's where, again, Americans, they'll watch a movie and then think that you just have tanks rolling in downtown DC or some shit. Like, it's really crazy. Yeah.
I mean, we know that construction equipment like bulldozers, those things destroy roads when they go on them. I mean, maybe if they, no, I don't think I've ever seen a bulldozer on a paved road that wasn't all tore up.
Yeah, well, our roads can't handle regular cars and semis without being torn the fuck up.
Oh man. You know,
our infrastructure cannot handle tanks.
I remember talking to an engineer one time about like roads and racetracks and all that stuff, and he said that because I said something about, do you just make it the same way you build a road or something? He said, oh no, our roads have to be able to withstand, you know, long haul truckers and logging trucks and things that weigh 50 to 100,000 pounds, like. And they still don't, of course, but racetracks don't have to be able to withstand that.
Yeah. Well, and that's where like, you see all those signs where it's like people don't generally pay attention to them because they're not hauling, but it's like the weight limit signs you'll see ever so often is like because the roads can only handle so much actual weight before it starts coming apart, you know, and that's like. Yeah, engineers are the very few people. Well, engineers and the semi haulers are the only ones that have to think about all that shit.
Yeah.
God forbid you're hauling some shit and then you end up on a route that can't handle your weight. You know what I mean? And it actually falls apart on you. I'm sure it's happened to plenty of people.
Well, I don't read about it very often, but every so often you read about some logging truck that lost its load and killed, you know, everyone that was on the road behind them for a mile. So
Oh yeah.
those big accidents happen.
Yeah, like the logging thing. That's definitely something that really happens. I mean, I don't know if there's a number of it should be or it shouldn't be. There's like, I don't know if that's a preventable accident. If not, it seems like the only way to prevent that would be only moving logs on the railroad.
I mean,
I don't even know if that's possible.
Searching for logging truck accidents 2021, 526,000 results. I'm sure there's some repeats. I'm sure that there are quite a few repeats of each example, but that's.
Woo. Yeah, there's lots of semis on the road at all times. I fucking hate semis, man.
Drunk driving accidents 2021 returns 54 million results. So it's like
I was driving on a bridge one time and it was going through a curve, and this UPS truck that was hauling two trailers, the trailers started like drifting into my lane. I don't know how we fucking avoided it, but the shit like almost knocked, because it was like on a highway, so it would have knocked me over the railing off of an overpass, basically, like at least 15-foot drop or something. So it was like, I don't know again, I don't necessarily believe in anything, but I definitely was close to death that day. And like, it was one of those situations where I'm like, fucking semis should not be on the same roads as other vehicles. It's just too dangerous, because the way physics works on those things, it's really unpredictable.
Have you ever been driving through the mountains where they do those switchbacks, where like you're going up the hill and we go around the switchback and you're in the right lane, but then you have to get into the left lane, and there might be a truck in the other lane going the other direction that has to change lanes also. And so there are potential moments where vehicles have to cross on a mountain pass, not even a mountain switchback. That shit, it blows my mind that that's even a thing.
Yeah, driving in the mountains is,
and it's completely to cater to the lack of maneuverability of a truck with a giant trailer.
There's no way to describe it. Like, you got to be white to like enjoy doing that, because that's some like, every time that type of shit happens to me, I'm like, oh my god, we might die today. Fuck, because of this poorly designed route. Like, fuck. And that shit, I hate that shit, man. I hate like. And that shit happens in the country too, where you have roads way more narrow than they should be, and then a blind curve. And I'm like, man, some white person designed this shit, and they just didn't care. They don't care about life. Like, this was a design that does not care about the death that's going to result from this fucking poor design. And that's where I'm like, I'm not blaming all white people, obviously, but that's some shit where it's just culturally, this country is like totally about, it doesn't matter how many people die as long as it gets done and somebody makes money. And that shit is like very arbitrary and forced. And that's where I mean, like, there's no actual skin color associated with it, but this country, there's a caste specifically that very much will do anything to make money. And that includes building a fucking road in which people are going to die because it was so poorly designed.
What's interesting about all that is the United States still has a very vast and comprehensive freight infrastructure. I doubt that it's as advanced as China's freight infrastructure.
Oh God, no way.
But man, if only the last 20 years the United States had redirected its efforts to bolstering its freight infrastructure and modernizing it to the level of China, we wouldn't have as many of these issues.
Anytime they reinvest in the infrastructure, they just try to duplicate the same shit and don't actually change anything.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate part of all this. It's even beyond I want to say ever since the New Deal. Ever since the New Deal, they've just been trying to maintain that specific infrastructure, and all of the investment goes into making sure that the New Deal America stays the same.
Yeah. Which
is why we're still fossil fuel dependent. You know, the notion that they had big companies trying to make electric cars and quote unquote failing because of the incentives that fossil fuel companies had to lobby against them succeeding. And now it's like framed as if the only way we can get out of fossil fuel companies is if some savior comes along and rescues us from the oil companies. And it's so crazy to see this manufactured impotence. Like, that's what, you know, not to shift it. I'm not going to shift to doom, but I think that's where this notion of what happens when society follows the wrong leaders, what are the end results of that? It's like we're seeing this shit play out in real time. Because you have so many people who last year would be like, oh, Elon and Grimes are going to get us to Mars and they have the vision for the future. And now that they're not together.
Well,
like,
Grimes figured out that their child's name is Kyle. Everyone should be mad about that.
Who also doesn't call her mom.
Yeah. Oh. Oh.
Yeah. Apparently she didn't realize you were supposed to teach your kids to call you mom and dad. She didn't know that. So these are the people that last year a good percentage of the population that were convinced that these people were going to lead us to Mars and be our king and queen on Mars. Girl boss.
Ugh.
So,
and I think the only way out of fossil fuel dependence is to use all the fossil fuels. I'm serious. Like,
that's one way to go.
Like, they're not going to be able to. They're not going to stop making money off of it until they can't.
I mean, that didn't work out in Dune, bro.
Well, I mean, if you get to the end of Dune, it kind of does.
I mean, if your goal is to completely reset society back to nothing, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what I mean.
If that's the goal, then yeah, it worked out. But I don't know if that was the larger goal.
No.
But yeah, they were trying to reset society. So yeah, I guess yeah. They succeeded.
They succeeded. They stripped the galaxy of spice production.
Of all the spice, yeah. They won. Well, they succeeded.
There's no winning in when you fight an empire. There's only dismantling the empire.
Oh, okay. This is where, okay, maybe discussing Foundation would be good because not necessarily the intricacies.
I mean, it focuses on empire, so. Right.
And I think because they've actually gone to a larger scale, it seems, than what was in Herbert's empire. Like, I feel like...
well, I think Herbert's universe is much more focused on Arrakis, whereas
I mean,
Foundation is fundamentally as broad as the galaxy can get. It goes, spans the edge to the core.
Well, I mean, I think we only see Arrakis, but it's implied that the Empire reaches the edges of the empire, like the edges of the galaxy.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
It's just what I mean is that it's like 3,000 years in Dune versus this one. I think is like 30,000. Or maybe it was less. I forget.
The main three books of Foundation span 1,000 years.
Okay, so it is shorter.
But the whole empire, I believe, is like the iteration that falls was like 10,000 years old or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
It's been around a while, and then the current regime had been there for several hundred years.
Yeah, exactly. This Cleon line. And that's where this is what I was getting at ultimately is like the thing that I believe that both of these stories are trying to tell in Foundation less, they're not being less coy about the metaphor is that empires innately become homogenous in thought and will make themselves feel as if they are heterogeneous in thought when it's very clear they're not even remotely heterogeneous. But then the way that Foundation is like trying to present schools of thought or segments of society, it then becomes like everybody has these questions inherently, and it's how much you consult the others that make you successful or not.
I think that's like, kind of, it's like, is it the second episode where the young woman who solved the Abraxas equation is like, well, which version of math do we preserve? Base 10, base 9, right, base 27?
Yeah.
And she points out that, of course, the person who suggests base 9 is going to suggest base 9 or base 10 because they're from the core. They're from, like, you know, the homogenous society. And of course they're going to think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, that was a great, I feel like
that was like one of the most important scenes in the story so far, because it asks the most important question is like, what aspects of humanity and its history are we going to even try to preserve, knowing that these dark ages are going to slowly erode every connection that the culture has to its history. Like,
so, okay, that's perfect observation, because I believe that is where this story is more explicit about framing that question than Dune is. And I think it's when you're doing science fiction, you have to be very careful of the audience being willfully ignorant and using that ignorance to occlude the things that are too couched in metaphor. So then you have people looking at Star Wars and being like, oh, I didn't think that the Empire stood for anything. You know what I mean? And people being able to make that because they couch the metaphor a little. It's not even really couched in Star Wars, but you can play willful ignorance enough to then be like, oh, I just thought the Emperor was like this dude with lightning powers. I didn't think he represented anything. He just has lightning powers, and that's cool. And then he got this lightsaber, and Darth Vader's got, you know, all these buttons on his chest and these lights, and that's cool. He don't represent anything bigger. But when they have those conversations in Foundation, you can't ignore it because they have it openly. And I think that's where science fiction has to be very careful if they want to make those philosophical, because this is why even years later, it's like, well, is Matrix a trans story? I don't know. I just think it's kind of cool. Well, it's just cool science fiction, man.
The whole idea that an empire with an emperor as crazy as Palpatine, who would commission the creation of a clone army, wouldn't also be vested in the development of cloning technology to preserve himself.
I mean, like, it's not a different story than Foundation.
I know it's the same. It's the same thing. It's I think.
But it's very much more couched.
Yeah. I think what it really means is that imperialism is imperialism. It doesn't matter who's delivering it. There's imperialism arises. It's like fascism emerges. Evil is a thing. Darkness is a thing. And imperialism is this thing, no matter what culture it emerges from. It always ends up expressing itself the same way. It doesn't matter if they're Roman or English or German or Japanese or Chinese or America, or if they're, you know, based in Coruscant or wherever I can't even remember what that big planet was with the Space Needle thing. I just want to say that Space Needle scene when the terrorists detonated their implanted bombs and the tether broke and the spaceport starts like careening out of its place, and that entire scene where that tether falls to that planet, crashes through countless layers of the city before it even touches the ground, and then, I mean, as you pointed out, wraps itself around the planet. I don't think that I haven't, even on the scale of Star Wars, I haven't seen a space station on that scale. Like even in Star Trek, like with Star Trek Beyond, when they go to defend that giant space station. That thing was huge, but this one is that tether.
So this is the first time we've had 100 million people die on screen and actually
Yep.
see what it looks like for 100 million people to die. And we've had movies where they discuss that scale or where they imply it, like Independence Day, for example, where it's like you kind of see it, but this one is like we get a whole elapsing of the event playing out, and it's too big for an individual mind to comprehend what 100 million people dying looks like. Even though we've just seen it, it's
Yeah.
still, my mind is still trying to comprehend it, because then you hear, like, in the next episode they start talking about the cleanup of, there's 127,000 bodies floating around in the atmosphere, and it's bringing down morale when they come back into the atmosphere because they light up. And it's like, these are the things that the Empire is dealing with and talking about it in such a cold, soulless discussion, in the way as if they feel burdened, as if they have to be the only people making these decisions amongst their clones. And that's where it's really, they're not subtle about it, but at the same time, I don't think you can be subtle about it when a part of the audience is going to play willfully ignorant and act like they didn't see what was trying to be said with that.
It's been retconned that between 1 and 2 million people died on the first Death Star detonation, and meanwhile the Empire already had a second one going. It was going to be complete within a matter of years, and then by 30 years later they've got an entire moon turned into a super Death Star. I don't think empires care about that. 1 million people is nothing to an empire. It's a space empire, a galactic space empire.
No.
1 million people, please. That's like a small moon. That's not even going to affect the economy.
To this one, 100 million isn't a lot. It was just, and that was so crazy. Is to me, they made it like the Empire was more concerned about the symbol of the Star Bridge than the actual 100 million people.
Yeah.
And that's what was so chilling, even more about the portrayal of that discussion, where it's like I said, they're not being subtle about it. And I think a lot of people aren't going to be into it because the thing they're even being less subtle about is the white male savior complex associated with leading an empire. And then
because at the end of him, what's his name, Dusk, is like worried about their legacy as he's about to be like disintegrated.
Yeah. Well, but then you get this white male coming in saying, you're gonna fail, and using this math that he lied about it's not fully complete, but then he's using it to undermine this other white guy, and then a black woman coming in and being like, okay, I'm gonna have to save everybody. And then another black woman coming, okay, we're gonna have to save everybody. So that aspect of it, they're not being subtle with it, and I love it. I think that's amazing that they are basically saying, yeah, black women are gonna fucking save the universe.
I thought it was actually, now that you mentioned that, I thought it was really interesting. Like when the mathematician guy like pulls out his little snow globe and does some hand waving, and then we see the really cool calculation visualization, and then a couple scenes later we see her do it, and he asks her like, well, how long did it take? She's like, oh, I got it like my second try. Like he's asking her like, how hard was it to get it to work? Like, because he for whatever reason didn't think that the woman who solved the Abraxas equation couldn't figure out his snow globe.
Well, I don't know if he thought she couldn't, but so much as how long.
Yeah.
Like, and that's where the way, like,
I mean, he even says it that he basically set her up.
Right. And I think what's happening is he's ultimately, the way they're framing his character, he's like the architect in the Matrix that has this.
He even looks like the architect from the Matrix.
Oh, yeah. He even looks like him. But he has this integral anomaly that he can't solve, which he manifested by lying about having solved, and then ultimately the girl becomes the anomaly and solves the equation. Like I mean, I'm assuming she solves the equation. Obviously, the story isn't fully told. Like they're going to do something for their adaptation, and I doubt they'll follow everything along, But it's like the way that they're setting up this story to then reflect about evolution, empires, the individuals with empires, the leaders. They're doing the macro and the micro really well in a way that David Lynch's Dune never had the opportunity to go really into the macro culture. He went into the macro thought, which was an interesting experiment at the time. But then I think the sci-fi interpretations did a better job than Lynch's, as far as like being able to show the interplay between the macro and the micro. But this is where Foundation, to me, is doing a really good job of showing, the way that the empire sees itself at the top and the way that that's playing out at the mid and the bottom levels.
Yeah.
Which in the other, in other examples like Matrix, we only see lower level perspectives, and we don't really see how the architect sees himself or how the Oracle sees herself. Much, we get glimpses, but the way that they're giving us insight into the top, the middle, and the bottom, I think is a very interesting examination.
The Oracle and the architects, they're like interdimensional beings at that point. They have to take on a form that can be interacted with by Neo or by anyone else, because the mainline characters can't even. It was what did I see? I saw this meme today. It said something to the effect of, I bet it was like, when I'm yelling at squirrels to get out of the way, this must be what God feels like when he's watching humans, like when he's driving or something like that. And I remember one time we talked about, like, I don't tell jokes to ants because, well, first, I don't think they'd understand me, but I would have to assume some kind of form that they could even communicate with. I think it's the same thing at some point. We could never actually communicate directly with the architect, and he has to take on some limited form.
Oh.
It's like there's an episode of Battlestar Galactica, the sci-fi series, where a Dean Stockwell Cylon is complaining to his creators, like, why did you give me these eyes? I want to be able to watch a supernova. I want to be able to see gamma rays. Well, why? I think it's similarly that the creator still has to take on some other form to communicate. Maybe that's a science fiction trope.
I mean, not even. It's it's in the Bible. Like, I guess technically you kind of think of Bible science fiction. But yeah, even down to like the burning bush or pillar of smoke, or
that would be a really interesting adaptation to set the Bible in space.
I always thought all you have to do is basically replace the word Lord with the word internet, and it would be like
what's
seriously
think
about it.
What's begat refreshed? You gotta refresh, and they refresh the page.
I mean, you don't have to change anything else about except just interchange Lord with internet, and like the internet said, the internet knew, the internet did this, and it's like it's not far off from the way things are in terms of like the internet as this nebulous abstract entity in which if you think of something, it already exists on the internet, and in that way the internet
Rule
as an
32?
abstract. What is it?
Is that Rule 32 of the internet? Rule 32. Yeah. No, that's the internet. Yeah. No, maybe it's 37. Damn it. 34. Sorry, I got completely sidetracked there.
No worries.
There's a rule of the internet that asserts that if you find something, if you say something exists, then it also exists as porn, and if it doesn't exist, you are obligated to create that website.
Yeah, well, yeah. In this day and age, yeah, if you can think of it, it probably exists as a porn already. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Rule 34. There is porn of it, no exceptions.
And I just mean, like, you take two words and you try to be like, oh, this is something novel. I came up trying to be novel, and then Google it, and somebody already has a meme out of it. You know, you're like, oh, this is a weird, this abstract knowledge synthesis, protocol has become something bigger than any individual part of itself. And that's where I mean, like, it's a deity if you abstract it and unify it enough.
So this is funny. I found a published list of the rules of the internet. Rule number 1, do not talk about rules 2 through 33. Rule 34, there is porn of it, no exceptions. Rule 35, the exception to Rule 34 is the citation of Rule 34. Rule 37, there are no girls on the internet.
Yep. Accurate.
Rule 41, everything is someone's sexual fetish.
Yep.
Rule 46, they will not bring back snacks. Rule 47, you will never have sex. Rule 48, questions. Rule 49, profit. I mean, that's really cynical, but I mean, that was also produced by 4chan, so I that whole era of the internet was like a really weird dark dungeon. Mm-hmm. And then things like I think half of them started 8chan, and the rest of them went and started what was like Boing Boing or Reddit or something.
Well, and they did studies. It's like, it's not that the internet makes people assholes. It's that it amplifies their voices, so it seems like more people are assholes when really there's just people who were assholes offline already, and they just have more influence.
Yeah. And then it's also convenient that there's a concentrated repository of all the things that they really enjoy talking about or looking at or sharing with each other. A nasty cavernous echo chamber of internet dungeonry. It's like Facebook, but without the advertisements.
Yeah. This storm is crazy. Like, it came out of nowhere.
Wait, you got a storm?
Yeah. It's raining really, really hard, which is where I'm like, it was sunny about 20 minutes ago.
But
that's that unpredictable weather shit, man.
It's not raining here at all. It's sunny out.
Yeah, it was like that here 20 minutes ago. But now it's like fucking torrential downpour.
Well, that's interesting because there have been many times when it's supposed to be raining in Bloomington, and I call my dad, and it's raining at his house, but it's not at mine.
Huh.
Oh yeah, there's a giant red spot right over your location, and there's nothing over me.
Roof is Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I've always found the weather in Bloomington to be really surreal because some parts of it torrential downpour, and then other parts of it completely dry.
Yeah,
and there's no rhyme or reason to it.
No, not at all. There's at least 3 different weather systems in this town, at least 3, if not 4. And you hear shit like that about places like San Francisco, um, or like Oakland, where they'll say, "Oh yeah, there's 11 different weather systems," and it sounds crazy, but no, yeah, like you said, it's probably I can't even fathom what it would be like to have sun right now because it's such a torrential downpour. It's fucking raining sideways. Like when you can see it blowing sideways, that's what's happening right now, which is where
I mean, there's some dude in my neighbor's driveway on his Harley, and he's got,
you can see
sleeveless
the sky
t-shirt.
right now.
Huh?
I mean, you can see the sun right now.
Yeah, the sun's out. It's
That's crazy.
It's
We're in the
bright
same
down
city.
here. We're in the same.
You live like a 10-minute, well, maybe 12-minute drive if there's no traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I seriously, I thought I heard thunder, and it turned out to be a motorcycle. And the dude's.
I mean, it may have been thunder too. That just happened to coincide, which is where.
if
Oh, I just heard his motorcycle too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I thought, I was like, man, that thunder's been rolling for a long time. Like right after you mentioned that it was raining, and so I look out, it's like there's nothing there. Why is it still happening?
No, it's really crazy that this storm is happening because, yeah, it was sunny like 10 minutes ago. That's Indiana though.
Yeah, when I look at the map, I see a bunch of green dots that are all kind of arranged in some kind of swirling pattern, and somehow I just managed to squeeze between two of those big blobs. I should get some rain by 7 o'clock, according to weatherchannel.com. So this gets back to like the absurdity of the weather that we're having. I read last night that the jet stream has been moving north, like consistently moving north, and it's at this point now where what would have been common jet stream location is now way south of the jet stream. So we're not even getting like the same kind of polar vortex action that we were getting last summer. We're getting a whole different version of a weather pattern now. Which also means that it's...
I've been saying that shit was happening, but people are like, no, crazy.
Well, it's...
and we're in the middle of the purple on the radar.
Yeah.
So you got between it, we're right in the heart of the purple. I'm looking at pass right over our place. So yeah, we got...
When I zoom in on my portion of the map, nothing. When I zoom out, it's like, oh, there's that big blob. Yeah. With the jet stream moving north, it means that when we do get polar vortex activity, it's going to be even more hardcore than previously. It's only going to be getting worse. And these temperature swings, that's just indicative of a system with more energy. It has a higher peak and a higher or lower trough and a higher peak of potential energy expression. Yeah. And so it's only going to get interesting and more interesting, I think. I don't want to say it's, I'm not trying to doom and gloom the sky is falling, but I mean, the sky is falling, but it's going to take a while. It's going to take 20 more years, 30 more years. And who knows where, like, the rate of change or how that will accelerate or decelerate.
Well, I've seen it change so much in my lifetime where it's like,
yeah,
I can exist in it, but I know other people have a problem surviving it, so I don't want it to get worse. But that's where I'm like I said, I'm interested to see it because it does seem to be getting worse. Where, yeah, the winters are more harsh, like the temperatures are colder. There's more ice.
Yeah. Speaking of colder temperatures, I haven't really been keeping up with it too much, but my understanding is that if we get hit by another brutal cold winter, there's still a chance that our electrical infrastructure won't be ready, and that we will experience another hard season of blackouts and long-term power outages. Like there's been talk about, changing the way that things are being done, like repurposing old coal facilities to function as thorium reactors, or I mean, sorry, salt reactors, and that stuff is cool, but it's not happening yet. And like even China apparently was having power issues because they were trying to get their industry back into full swing. And lo and behold, their power infrastructure was designed to function, at a moderate pace so that they weren't like destroying their system or undermining even undermining their ability to get coal to their plants. And so this should be resolving itself soon because economic stability is, the name of the game for the Chinese. But
that's the source of their crypto ban, actually.
Yeah.
Or a lot of the crypto ban, in the sense of them shutting down all the mining operations so it doesn't fuck with the power grid.
Yeah. And so, like, they're going to make the changes they need to ensure electrical stability of their infrastructure. They're building reactors all over the place. We're not doing that shit. Like, there was
too busy putting money in military, man.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
I was up in Indianapolis 2 weeks ago, and on my way into town, was it 2 weeks? 1, 2, yeah, like 2 weeks ago. My way into town, somebody like drove off the road and hit a pole right next to a power substation and took out one of the big ass transformers, like in the middle of Indianapolis. And they were out of juice for like several hours. This was like, kind of circulated, but I don't think it was like.
When was this?
Like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, I didn't hear anything about that.
Yeah, the power was out for I was driving, I get to 38th Street, and I didn't realize I was at 38th Street because all the lights were out. The rallies was completely dark. And I didn't even, this is how bad it was. I just drove through the thing, not even realizing until I was at, right next to the rallies. I was northbound on College, and I see that, holy shit, that's the rallies. Holy crap, I just crossed 38th Street blindly. Like, I didn't even realize it. I seriously, it was one of those, like, what the... And then, because I can't see anything because everything on College in Indy is, like, shrouded by trees or other cars, I'm sitting there, like, relying on my GPS, which is now acting crazy because everyone's on...
No local tower.
Yeah.
And everybody's taxing it all at the same time.
Yeah, everyone's trying to figure out what's going on. And so all of a sudden my GPS goes haywire, and it's like, okay, well, I can kind of remember where I'm going because I've been there once before. It's like, what if a single car can take out a city or a half of a significant portion of a city such as Indianapolis for a few hours? Like, and that just doesn't. I just don't think that bodes well. I mean, our infrastructure is ancient at this point, and they might have updated certain portions of it and added small substations here and there, but. If a car can take out a city, or if a really nasty winter storm can completely knock out a state, we're in a really bad situation, actually. It's like dire situation. We shouldn't be relying on brand new Ford trucks to kill their batteries to keep people alive. That's just like, that's so messed up. Yes. Yeah. Use your $80,000 to $140,000 brand new truck to keep you alive for 4 days. Oh, by the way, this will void your battery's warranty. I don't know. I shouldn't be so critical of the way that people responded to that situation. They did everything they could, and it's unfortunate that people suffered. It's unfortunate that people were taking advantage of other humans too, but apparently that's the name of the game.
Apparently, right.
It's hard to imagine a different version of America having been so successfulely indoctrinated into this system. And I mean, I've been to China one time. I've been to Canada one time. I've been to Mexico one time. And I got to see significant portions of China in some very different situations for people, depending on where we were at any given point. But the socialism in China seemed very similar to America in terms of the distribution of wealth and the access to resources. Although that was just my lightning analysis as a 25-year-old riding around on a tour bus. So I'm pretty sure that my analysis is deeply flawed.
I mean, I have no idea about their socialist policies.
Yeah.
So I'm not even going to begin to.
I can't read Chinese. I can only read what's been translated for me by the Lord Internet box, and there's only it's so crazy for me to try and. I mean, I got to take everything with a grain of salt when it's about China, because I'm reading something written by somebody whose name is like a Western name. And there's no way that I can tell, does this person speak Mandarin? Can they read Chinese? Are they actually there? Or are they just like synthesizing an article out of some AP thing or some South China Morning Post article that was also translated for them?
Yeah, it's hard to know, man.
It's like information that comes out of Russia. Part of me wants to believe that there are people in Russia who are just like us, who are not happy with the way things are, and they are paying attention and they're being honest with their journalism. But I also know that there was a study came out recently. It was like 9 out of 10 extreme right or Christian groups on Facebook were being operated by Eastern European troll farms. And so it's like, I don't know. I think that's actually points to what you were saying about the loudest hecklers having the loudest voices, because they're the ones who are making the most noise.
Yep. It just looks disproportionate.
Yeah. But then when I think of the terms, the silent majority, is like, is that referencing all the people who don't give enough of a damn to even talk to people on the internet? How many people actually use the internet?
I mean, it's got to be like 2 or 3 billion, right? At least
4.66 billion active internet users worldwide, 59.5% of the global population.
I feel like that's a lie. I feel like that's overestimating.
Yeah. It says of this
total,
some
of those people are fake.
Well, it says of this total, 4.32 billion accessed via mobile devices. So I think it's probably more realistic that there are 4.32 billion total, and then the extra 300 million people, extra 340 million people are people who have computers.
Right.
And I bet a significant portion of those 4.3 billion people have more than one device. Mm-hmm. Because I have 4 devices just in this room. 6 with the other, 7, 8 including the other room. And then Sheila's got 3 or 4 devices herself. 4 devices.
Yeah.
So
I think a lot of people are like that too.
That's like 12 devices in one building.
Yeah.
So she and I don't represent 12 internet users.
No, and that's where your individual device addresses are going to look different, even though you all have the same IP.
Yep.
There's going to be different MAC addresses. Yeah. So they're going to count those as like 12 different people, more likely.
Yeah.
Which is obviously wrong,
Yeah.
So that's where I'm like, I'm not buying that number.
So let's say that if the average is somewhere between 12 and 1, so like 6, then let's just say that there are maybe 2.2 billion internet users then.
That sounds about right to me. That sounds like more accurate.
Yeah. It's tough trusting like statistics about computing anyways. At some point, I'm sure that the internet will return that there are like, 12 billion active internet users. It might be even less than 2 billion because I've had, dozens and dozens of devices over the years, and how many of them I don't know how many of them are still being used, but some of them might still being used. Do they count that more than once because it appears on some other part of the continent?
That's a good question. Yeah, it's hard to know how they're counting these things.
Because I what was it? I don't think it was Google. I think it was like YouTube or something. Like I signed in and it said that I needed to like register my device. Maybe it was Netflix, and I had like 5 or 6 devices that I didn't have anymore. Maybe it was Amazon. I can't even remember now. But I remember like seeing all these old devices that hadn't been used in more than 5 years. And some of those I'm positive no longer exist because they wouldn't have been able to upgrade to the next Android or iOS. And we live in strange times where a company can decide, oh yeah, your phone doesn't work anymore, even though it's the same phone that it was 24 hours prior.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a lot of changes to like ownership, what the concept of ownership on its own, because I casually follow the whole like right to repair movement because I like to fix things. I like taking things apart and seeing if I can put it back together. Mm-hmm. And when things break, I want to know why, and if I can fix it, then I try to fix it. But I'm pretty sure we're like on the verge of a redefinition of ownership of goods and products. Everything's going to be licensed soon. When you're done with your, they've already started, the model already exists, when you're done with your lease, you return it and you get a new lease.
So then did you ever actually own it?
That's the point. Do people actually own these things anymore? Do we even own our computers? We might own the hardware, but without the software, they're pretty useless. Do we even own the hardware, though? I mean, at some point, is that stuff going to be subsidized, like completely subsidized? And at which point, like there's this whole stink about Chrome where they've added this API that allows them to monitor activity, and so they say, oh yeah, well this is really only for enterprise, so big business can make sure their employees are working. But when you get the latest update to Chrome, this API is enabled, and anybody who wants to access that API, all they got to do is write a few lines of code in their INI, and then boom, their system can read that information too. Like I was looking over the list of just wide open APIs in Chrome that they say are so that their users can access their web services, and I understand that to some degree you have to have some of these things open if you want to use Google Calendar or Google whatever. But at some point, it becomes way too intrusive, and with a society that's so seemingly concerned with privacy and protecting their privacy and their right to privacy, I'm concerned that it's just an act. It's just performative because these changes are being announced, and people are I don't think people even know that these things happen. I'm not convinced that the average computer user is following any kind of technology journalism at all.
Oh, I know they're not. And I think that's what's so okay, let me say it like this. I was not anticipating that people on the left were actually enlightened, but I was disheartened to see how unenlightened they were when they all started parroting the anti crypto rhetoric that was rampant like the basically 6 months ago. Um, it was weird because I'm looking at it happening and I'm like, oh, there's like a narrative that's floating around and everybody's just accepting it because it sounds environmentalist and it sounds pro environment. So they're like, I'm just gonna go along with this without actually looking into it. And it was just disappointing to see people who I thought were at least somewhat rational just parroting fucking nonsense that, again, it's like it just sounds like you're pro environment, but then when you hear somebody saying it, it's just proof that they don't actually look into things and hop on bandwagon.
Well, very few people fully understand the requirements for mining.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I don't, I can't tell you how many articles I read where somebody was complaining about, complaining about crypto consuming a lot of electricity, and then the next article on that website is like, championing Bitcoin. And so it's like, I don't even think these online journals, I don't think they actually understand the content that they're pushing or the narratives that they're pushing.
Not at all. Not at all.
And then of course there are crypto journalists who are praising, they praise Ethereum and then turn around and complain about environmental impact. Like, they'd never mined a damn thing in their lives. I don't even think those people know how to build their own computer.
Right. And that's where, these people are using Power Max and G4 Max and posting this stuff unironically as if it's not the same machine. That's what's so crazy to me is these people are all using electricity to condemn
the use of electricity.
The use of electricity is not as if it's not the electricity's company's dependence on fossil fuel that's the problem.
Yeah.
And they just got wrapped up in passing the buck and not actually condemning the fossil fuel industry. And that's why I was so disappointed, because that's where I'm like, oh yeah, it's super easy to go after cryptocurrency miners, especially since there is no real, but it's a losing thing because there's no consolidated cryptocurrency miner association or anything. So
yeah, the few consortiums that exist, they're like not in it for each other. They're all in it for themselves. And
yeah.
That's like the same thing as people complaining about China on the internet using their phone that was manufactured in China. or their phone that uses chips manufactured in China.
Yeah.
Or using their computer to complain about China. When like practically all motherboards are manufactured in China.
Yeah.
I think like
it's really
Super Micro, I think they're still manufactured in the United States, but they're like dedicated to the server industry. Like, no gamers using a Super Micro motherboard.
There's still stuff built here, but it's just so little. I think Dells are still built here, like at scale.
Yeah, but I think their Asus motherboards come from China.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that's what I mean. Like the actual stuff being built here is still, a lot of the parts are coming from China, so it's not 100% made in America. There's like nothing that's 100% made in America that you're going to be able to just go to them, like go buy off the shelf. and that's, I don't know. It's definitely by design, but that's obviously not what the intention was 20, or I want to say like 50 years ago when America's designing their government. They're not thinking, oh, we're going to be completely dependent on China for our supply chain in 50 years. That wasn't the goal. So now that we're here, it seems ridiculous anytime you hear anti-China sentiment. And that's kind of where, to me, it's like a lack of self-awareness that's uniquely boomer to be so dependent on the Chinese supply chain, but still have anti-Chinese rhetoric so common. It's like they're not only our allies, they basically make our daily lives possible.
And
Our daily lives would not be possible without China.
I bet
Not at all.
the number of Chinese restaurants in America that survived pandemic is a higher percentage than the percentage of locally owned small business restaurants in America that survived pandemic year one.
Oh, undoubtedly.
I'm almost. I have no data to back my assertion, but I feel pretty confident that the Chinese restaurant industry did not suffer the losses that every other cuisine suffered in America.
I have no doubt. I mean, I know our local, there's like a Chinese, there's Chinese and Korean, but there's a couple restaurants 5 minutes away and they were packed pretty much. I mean, not packed with people, but in the sense of there's a lot of traffic going in and out where and this shit never slowed down for them.
They also come from cultures that wear masks.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Everybody in there was wearing masks too. Yep. Exactly right. That's exactly right. So no, that's part of, I started, there's the Asian Mart on 10th and the bypass. I started going there more frequently just to get, I was trying like different snacks and shit just to see, there's this type of dessert and this type of dessert and just seeing different shit. And
I like the Asian preserved fruits. Because they use like salt. Their candies aren't always sweet. Some of them are like salty and like so salty that the preserved fruit itself becomes even sweeter. That's
I like
really cool.
Desserts. Like their desserts are generally not too sweet, so then you'll have like a Swiss cake roll with wheat cake or something.
Yeah, and it's not like all sugar. You can actually taste. You can taste the cake itself.
Exactly. So that's where I'll do that type of shit instead of a Twinkie or something.
Yeah.
But then it's like, it's like $5 for four, or not even four. It's like one roll that's sliced into 4 segments. So it's basically like if you bought a Twinkie for $5. You know what I mean? So you're not doing that shit every day. But Twinkies shouldn't cost $1. That's a sign that something is not right. There's some shit processed in there that makes it possible for them to sell you that cake for $1 or less or whatever it costs. And that's where I'm like, no, this specific dessert should cost about $5 for this portion.
Yeah.
If it's not made from absolute shit. So I'm cool, but I'm also not going to eat it every day, which is why people shouldn't be eating Twinkies and Oreos every day, because that shit shouldn't be that cheap. It's like, the older you get, the more you realize that, Oreos and Twinkies shouldn't be that accessible because they shouldn't be made from materials that make them that accessible. Not that poor people shouldn't have them or anything like that, or anybody shouldn't have them. It's a matter of they shouldn't be that accessible. And the reason they're that accessible is because they're using ingredients and materials that shouldn't go in your body.
Well, Jamie Oliver just won his lawsuit with the McDonald's.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so it's like, it is...
Over the pink slime?
Yeah, it's written in fucking stone now. That shit is known to be a chemical.
Nice.
It's a chemical compound that contains various proteins and other chemicals. Undisclosed protein content. Like they got to be honest about it now, or they got to change the recipe to include actual chicken.
Which would, seem like it would be easier. No, they've scaled up too much where it's unsustainable. All this shit's unsustainable. I'm glad it's falling apart.
Yeah. Well, it's now that they've figured out vegetable-based beef and pork products and chicken products. Now, my understanding is they're moving on to vegetable-based protein fish or seafood products. And so it'll be I think the real test will be if they can emulate like the pollock fish stick or the pollock fake imitation crab, because if they can nail those flavors, and because I mean those things are already basically fake to begin with. They'll be they'll be able to change the way or the accessibility to that whole flavor palette.
Right.
And over time. Okay, go ahead.
I was gonna say if we can do surf and turf out of vegetables, then we're good.
Yeah, I mean, I know they can because when I was in Hong Kong, we went to a Buddhist restaurant, a vegan restaurant, and they brought out sashimi, some tofu that was prepared to be like salmon and tuna, and it looked like salmon and tuna, and it was flaky, and it was really close. And they brought out shark fin soup, and it tasted like the real thing, and so. It's not impossible.
The tofu steak is delicious.
Yeah. If it's done right.
I
mean, all these things have new. I think the real opposition to this stuff is that it has completely different preparation requirements. And so you can't
Heidi's mom. Do you remember Heidi's mom's restaurant in Indy? I don't know if you ever went there. But
I don't think I ever went there.
Best tofu steak. Yeah.
I mean, I believe it. I remember JP telling me all about Heidi's mom.
Now she had a restaurant in like 96 and Meridian or something in a like an office building. So people would go there on their lunch break and have like tuna salad or tuna salad sandwiches, and it was like really good homemade food, but in an office building. Like, but her tofu steak was, man, that shit was like legendary. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was at Right Res in the first location at the incubator downtown, like that building that's at the end of City Hall, there was a restaurant that was run by the people who did the Colorado Steakhouse. Not Colorado. Is it Colorado? The one that was up off north of 17th Street.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's
Colorado.
Right. That's right.
And they had a lunch place, and they just did sandwiches for the most part, but they were good. They were consistent, and I remember going there frequently because it was, a short walk. Just go for a walk outside or even walk through the building to get to this place. And it was just convenient and it was good. And I didn't have to go to McDonald's. I didn't have to walk like, half a mile to find the restaurant district. Or go to a bar, like a pub. Pub food is not lunch.
Well, but that's, there are benefits to city living and shit like that.
Yeah.
Is one of them where, I had a similar experience in Istanbul where it's like there was a restaurant that would be open. I think it was 24 hours, if I'm not mistaken. At least in the summer, it seemed like it was 24 hours.
That's like a hot spot.
You could go there.
For action.
Oh yeah, and
that sounds awesome.
There would always be people there, eating, or they always had something on the TV where there's like a soccer match or whatever. But it was great to just be able to know, because the food was so much healthier than anything that you could get any fast food restaurant, because it's like handmade. Great, you can see them making it in front of your face, so there's no bullshit in it, and it's just in a fucking brick oven, being made right there in that brick fire oven.
And then right next door is a coffee shop, and then across the street's a hookah bar, so the whole neighborhood smells delicious.
Basically, I mean, there's no hookah bar because you can just do the hookah at the table.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Because this is Turkey, so it's like, if you want a hookah,
you just pull it out
at the table. It's like you can probably get somebody there. I think sometimes people would carry them around, and there's like all kinds. It's really easy to get a shisha in Turkey, but like there's definitely bars. But like, people aren't gonna hesitate to do that shit at like an outdoor table. So that's where I'm like, it's just, it's just different in a city setting where you can do that shit where you can't do that in Bloomington. You can't just walk to the fucking anything being open at 3 a.m. People are sitting outside smoking, talking, And that's like, I mean, if you're downtown in Bloomington, you can go to a bar and do that. But I mean, this is like especially in this setting, it's like it's not necessarily drunk people that are going to be there at that time of day, and it's because it's not serving that demographic. It's just part of the city. Whereas like here,
Is there like
anything that's open at 3 is for drunk people.
Is there a drinking culture in Turkey?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Like in fact, I would see people walking around with beer more in Istanbul than I've ever seen. Like it's not even legal here.
Yeah.
Whereas you see people walking around on the street
Okay.
with beer there. Like when I was living there. I mean, it may not be legal now, but that shit was it because that
was
shit would
fairly
weird
common
me
then.
out. Where because it would like still weird me out. Years into it or like 2 years into it, where I'm like seeing people fucking just got a beer on the street. You're like, what the fuck? How this can't end well, but no, they,
It's a different culture.
yeah, it's just different.
They figured out how to do it.
Well, they're not as like blackout drunk, drinking oriented about their shit. So if
Yeah.
you see somebody walking around with a beer, they're probably not blackout drunk, Whereas here, if somebody's walking around with the beers because they've lost it, it's like, oh shit, that person doesn't realize they're walking around outside with the cup, and it's just completely different here. Concerning, yeah, like, and that's where again, I'm sure people do get drunk, but as far as like, yeah, we worked in an actual fucking bar doing karaoke nights. So I've seen the drinking culture firsthand, and it's just not, Americans just take that shit way too far. Whereas you never really, anybody who was getting blackout drunk at that bar was American, bro. Straight up.
Or maybe it was like their birthday.
No, it wasn't. That's just what Americans do.
Yeah.
Americans they can't have one drink. They can't have 2 drinks. Americans, if they go to a bar, they gotta have all the drinks. Buying everybody drinks. We're getting drunk. Woo! And it's just other people. British people do that shit too, apparently. But we're British light, so it's not a surprise. Is it any coincidence that it's our British cousins that can't handle their liquor either? But yeah, no, I just. I literally worked at a bar doing karaoke nights and just did not. I mean, obviously this is anecdotal, but and that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying my experience represents the ubiquitous culture, but we were in the literal heart of Istanbul in a bar, and it was always Americans that couldn't fucking not drink too much.
Man.
That shit it's like embarrassing even thinking about it, because that's when I'm like, oh, you can't go out of the country and not act a fucking ass, because then you see it was British people doing the same shit too. Yeah, Americans think like going abroad just gives them a pass to act like a fucking ass.
Well, it's like it's ultimate version of what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Right.
What happens in Europe stays in Europe. What happens in Turkey stays in Turkey.
So they think.
Except now the internet is real and it does not forget, and they're taking pictures of it.
Yep.
It's times like these that I'm glad that things like the Great Firewall of China exist, because I'm pretty sure that we have one too that's like protecting Americans from their own behavior outside of country. It like protects them from some random actors trying to find them except through Facebook, because you can find everyone through Facebook now, or Twitter.
The invisible veil of ignorance.
Well, that sounds like some
Harry
Sharia
Potter
shit,
right?
huh?
Oh, okay. So I was thinking Harry Potter, like.
Well, that too. Harry Potter and the Veil of Ignorance. I would go and see that movie. I'm serious. Those guys need to get on that. Radcliffe said that he'd be on board if Rowling wasn't, with her turf ass. Like, you know what? The Veil of Ignorance could possibly be the resurrection of that entire series.
Oh man,
Veil of Ignorance.
Radio.
Exceptional Randos Show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.
Good shit, man.
Yeah, man.